The 1960s changed American shopping forever, and the shopping mall was at the heart of it all. Malls back then were nothing like the glass and chrome temples we know today. From live organ concerts to strict dress codes, these centers had quirks and rules that would seem bizarre now. Here are 20 weird facts about 1960s shopping malls you probably didn't know. Fact 1. Malls had their own TV stations. If you walked into a shopping mall in the mid-1960s, you might have been greeted by cameras and television screens scattered throughout the building. Some of the more forward-thinking malls had their own closed-circuit television stations, not broadcasting to homes but to monitors placed strategically inside the mall. Programming included store advertisements, live fashion shows, and even cooking demonstrations, all designed to keep shoppers entertained and informed about what was happening in real time. Some malls featured local celebrities or the mall manager giving updates about sales and special events, adding a personal touch. This was a novel concept at a time when most American homes had only 3 or 4 television channels. The Southdale Center in Minnesota, which opened in 1956, was a pioneer of this idea, and by the 1960s, several malls across the country had adopted similar systems. Imagine walking past a fountain and seeing yourself on a monitor, or watching a live broadcast of a fashion show just 2 floors above. It created a sense of excitement and modernity, making the mall feel like more than a shopping destination. It was entertainment in itself. In an era before smartphones, seeing multiple TV screens in public was genuinely thrilling. Fact 2. Smoking was allowed everywhere. This one might be hard to believe for younger generations, but in the 1960s, you could smoke anywhere in a shopping mall, and we mean anywhere. People would light up cigarettes while browsing through clothing racks, trying on shoes in the shoe department, and even while eating lunch at the counter, there were ashtrays everywhere on store counters, at the ends of benches built into the planters that held decorative plants and placed conveniently next to every seating area. The entire mall would have a hazy quality to it, especially during peak shopping hours when hundreds of people were puffing away store employees, smoke behind the register. And there was no such thing as a designated smoking area, because the entire mall was a smoking area. You might remember the distinct smell of cigarette smoke mixed with perfume from the department store and popcorn from the snack counter. It was just part of the mall experience. Pregnant women would smoke while pushing strollers, and doctors would smoke while shopping for groceries at the mall's supermarket. Nobody thought twice about it because smoking was just what people did. It wasn't until the 1980s and 1990s that public opinion started to shift and smoking bans began to take effect. But in the 1960s, if you wanted to enjoy a Winston or a Marlboro while picking out a new dress, you were free to do so. Without judgment, the idea that this would someday be prohibited would have seemed absurd to most shoppers. Back then, it was simply part of the culture, and the malls reflected that culture without question. Fact 3. Fashion shows happened daily. One of the biggest draws to the shopping mall in the 1960s was the daily fashion show. These weren't occasional special events. They happened every single day, sometimes multiple times per day. Most major department stores had a dedicated stage area or runway where live models would showcase the latest fashions. You could grab a seat on one of the benches surrounding the stage and watch as models strutted down the runway, wearing everything from casual day wear to fancy evening gowns. The stores used these shows to move merchandise, and they were incredibly effective. If you saw something you liked on the runway, you could immediately head to that department and purchase it. The shows were usually hosted by someone from the store's fashion department, who would describe each outfit in detail, including the price and what accessories would pair well with it. Housewives would plan their shopping trips around the fashion show schedule, and it became a social event where friends would meet up to watch the latest styles. Many women would bring their daughters along to expose them to fashion and teach them about coordinating outfits. The shows often featured local models who worked part-time for the department stores, And becoming a fashion show model was considered a prestigious position in the community. Some malls even had professional runway stages, with theatrical lighting and sound systems that rivaled small theaters. The atmosphere was glamorous and aspirational. It made shopping feel like an event rather than a chore, and it created a sense of community among regular shoppers who would see the same faces week after week. Nowadays, you might catch a seasonal fashion show at a high-end mall, but the daily fashion show was a staple of 1960s mall culture that brought people together. Fact 4. The food court didn't exist, yet. If you grew up going to malls in the 1980s or later, you probably can't imagine a mall without a food court. But in the 1960s, this concept simply didn't exist. Instead, malls had a very different approach to food. Most department stores had their own lunch counters or tea rooms where you could sit down for a proper meal. These weren't fast food joints. They were sit-down restaurants with waitresses who took your order and brought your food to the table. The menus featured items like chicken salad sandwiches, tuna melts, club sandwiches, and the ubiquitous Jell-O salad that was so popular during that era. You might also find a small candy counter or a popcorn stand near the entrance of the mall. But the idea of having multiple fast food restaurants all grouped together in one central dining area simply hadn't been invented yet. If you wanted variety, you had to go to different stores, and each store's restaurant had its own distinct atmosphere and menu. Many of these lunch counters were considered quite upscale, and women would dress up specifically to have lunch at the department store. It was a social occasion where ladies would meet for lunch after shopping, and the restaurants were decorated beautifully with linens on the tables and proper place settings. The waitresses wore uniforms, and the service was formal compared to today's standards. Some stores like Woolworth's had long counters where you could sit on swivel stools and order from a grill cook right in front of you. This was entertainment in itself, watching your burger being made or your milkshake being mixed. The modern food court with its diverse ethnic options and casual atmosphere wouldn't appear until the 1970s and wouldn't become standard until the 1980s. Fact 5. You could buy live pets at the mall. Walking through a 1960s shopping mall, you might have been surprised to find a full pet store with live animals right in the middle of the shopping center. These weren't just stores selling pet supplies. They had actual puppies, kittens, birds, hamsters, and even more exotic animals like monkeys and baby alligators. The pet stores were usually located in high traffic areas, and people would stop to look at the animals in the windows. It was common to see children pressing their faces against the glass, watching puppies play, or begging their parents for a parakeet. The conditions in these stores would probably horrify modern animal welfare advocates. The animals were often kept in small cages or aquariums, and the stores were open during all mall hours, which meant the animals were constantly exposed to noise and crowds. Nobody seemed to think this was problematic at the time. It was just another attraction that made the mall interesting. Impulse buying was encouraged, and many families ended up bringing home a pet. They hadn't planned on getting simply because the kids fell in love with it at the mall. Some of the larger pet stores even had monkey exhibits where small primates would be kept in cages, and people could watch them play. This was considered family entertainment, and on weekends, families would specifically visit the mall just to see the animals. You could also buy tropical fish, and the stores would have entire walls of aquariums, creating a mesmerizing display of colorful fish swimming around. Buying a goldfish at the mall was a common reward for children who behaved during a shopping trip, and the pet store employees would carefully bag up your new fish in a plastic bag filled with water for the trip home. Fact 6. Organ music filled the air. One of the most distinctive features of a 1960s shopping mall was the live organ music that filled the air. Many malls had actual pipe organs installed, and they would hire professional organists to play. Throughout the day, the music was meant to create a pleasant shopping atmosphere, and it definitely succeeded in making the mall feel special. The organs were often quite elaborate with multiple keyboards and hundreds of pipes, Some were even installed on motorized platforms that would rise up from lower levels. Creating a dramatic entrance for the organist shoppers would stop what they were doing to watch and listen as the organist played popular tunes of the day, mixed with light classical pieces and show tunes. The music echoed throughout the mall, creating a soundtrack for your shopping experience. It was soothing and upbeat at the same time, making people feel relaxed and happy. While they spent money, the organists were often local celebrities in their own right, and some shoppers would come to the mall specifically to hear their favorite organist play. Children would sit on the floor near the organ, mesmerized by the sound and the sight of the organist's hands flying across the keyboards. Some malls even printed schedules, so shoppers would know when the organ performances would take place. This was long before malls played recorded music over speaker systems, and the live music gave the shopping experience a touch of class and sophistication. It made the mall feel like a cultural destination rather than just a commercial space. By the 1970s, most malls had switched to recorded music as it was cheaper than paying a live musician. But those who remember the sound of a pipe organ echoing through a 1960s mall will tell you it was something special that can never quite be replicated. Fact 7. Malls had bomb shelters built into them. This fact surprises a lot of people, but many shopping malls built in the late 1950s and throughout the 1960s were designed with Cold War fears in mind. And that meant incorporating fallout shelters into their design. The threat of nuclear war with the Soviet Union was very real in people's minds, and architects were instructed to include civil defense considerations in their plans. Many malls had basement levels or underground parking structures that were designated as fallout shelters in case of nuclear attack. You might remember seeing the distinctive black and yellow fallout shelter signs posted near stairwells and service corridors. These areas were stocked with emergency supplies, including water barrels, canned food, medical supplies, and radiation detection equipment. The malls were considered ideal shelter locations because they were large structures that could house thousands of people, and they already had the infrastructure needed to support large crowds. Some malls even conducted civil defense drills, where shoppers would be directed to shelter areas to practice evacuation procedures. This must have been quite surreal, walking through a modern shopping center buying the latest fashions, while simultaneously being reminded that nuclear annihilation could happen at any moment. The contrast between the optimism of consumer culture and the fear of nuclear war was stark. Mall management would receive regular inspections from civil defense officials to ensure their shelter areas met federal standards, and store employees were trained on what to do in case of an emergency announcement. Nowadays, most people don't even know these shelters existed, and many have been converted into storage areas or simply forgotten. But if you were shopping in a 1960s mall, there was always that underlying awareness that this bright, cheerful place could become a refuge during humanity's darkest hour. Fact 8. Car displays. We're inside the mall. Imagine walking through the mall and encountering a brand new automobile right in the middle of the corridor. This was a common sight. In 1960s shopping malls where car dealerships would set up elaborate displays featuring their latest models, the cars would be placed on rotating platforms complete with dramatic lighting and promotional materials. Beautiful models in evening gowns would sometimes pose next to the cars, and salesmen would be on hand to answer questions and hand out brochures. Families would gather around to admire the vehicles, and fathers would let their kids sit in the driver's seat to honk the horn and pretend to drive. Getting a car inside the mall was no small feat. It required careful planning, and often the vehicle had to be brought in through service entrances, or even before the mall was fully constructed. Some malls had removable glass panels that could be taken out to allow cars to be driven or rolled inside. The displays would stay up for weeks or even months, and they became landmarks within the mall. People would give directions like, "Meet me by the Corvette display," or "I'll be near the Ford exhibit." The cars were always pristine and polished to perfection, often showcasing the most expensive or sporty models that the average family couldn't afford. But that didn't matter because the display was aspirational. It represented the American dream on 4 wheels, and it reinforced the connection between shopping and status owning nice things. Whether it was a new dress from the department store or a new car was what life was all about in the 1960s. And having these symbols of success right in the mall made that connection explicit and impossible to ignore. Fact 9. Mall walkers weren't welcome. Today, many malls actively encourage people to walk for exercise before the stores open. But in the 1960s, if you tried to use the mall as your personal walking track, you would have been escorted out by security. The mall was strictly for shoppers, and the management made that very clear. There was no tolerance for what they called loitering, which included anyone who appeared to be in the mall without the intention of making a purchase. Elderly people who might benefit from walking in a climate-controlled environment weren't welcome unless they were shopping. Teenagers who wanted to hang out without buying anything would be followed by security guards and asked to leave if they lingered too long. The attitude was that the mall was private property, and if you weren't contributing to the retail economy, you didn't belong there. This seems harsh by today's standards, but it reflected the business model of the time. The mall developers and store owners had invested enormous amounts of money into creating these shopping palaces, and they wanted to protect that investment from anyone who might interfere with the shopping experience. Benches were deliberately uncomfortable or limited in number to discourage people from sitting too long. Security guards were trained to spot non-shoppers and politely but firmly suggest they move along. This created an atmosphere where everyone felt slightly watched, and the mall maintained strict control over who was allowed to use the space. It wasn't until the 1980s, when mall traffic started to decline, that management began to see the value in allowing mall walkers as a way to bring people through the doors. But in the 1960s, the message was clear. If you're not shopping, you're not welcome. Fact 10. There were no chain stores. When you walked through a 1960s shopping mall, you weren't greeted by the same stores you'd find in every other mall across America, because those national chain stores simply didn't exist yet. Instead, each mall had a unique collection of independent retailers and regional department stores. Sure, you might find a Woolworths or a JCPenney, but the majority of stores were local businesses that only existed in that particular mall, or perhaps in a few locations within the state. This meant that shopping at different malls was actually a different experience. Each mall had its own character and personality, determined by the mix of local merchants who set up shop there. You might find a women's clothing boutique run by a local designer, a toy store owned by a family that had been in business for generations, or a jewelry store where the owner himself would help you select a piece. The stores were individually owned and operated, which meant the customer service was personal, and relationships between shoppers and store owners developed over time. The owner would remember your name, know your preferences, and sometimes even offer you credit based on nothing more than a handshake. This was before the age of credit cards being ubiquitous, so personal relationships mattered. The inventory in each store was also unique. Store owners would travel to trade shows and select merchandise they thought would appeal to their specific customer base, which meant you couldn't find the same items in another city. This made shopping feel more special and discoveries more exciting. If you found something you loved, you bought it right then, because you knew you wouldn't find it anywhere else. The homogenization of retail was still decades away, and the 1960s mall reflected the diversity and individuality that would later be lost to corporate consolidation. Fact 11. Orange Julius was the original Smoothie King. Before there were smoothie chains on every corner, there was Orange Julius. And in the 1960s, this frothy orange drink was the undisputed king of mall beverages. The Orange Julius stand was a fixture in most shopping malls, and the line would often stretch down the corridor as people waited for their chance to order the signature drink. The recipe was supposedly secret, but everyone knew. It involved orange juice, milk, sugar, and some kind of magical powder that created that distinctive frothy texture. Watching the employees make an orange, Julius was part of the appeal. They would add the ingredients to a special blender, and the machine would whip it into a creamy, foamy concoction that was unlike anything else you could buy. The sound of those industrial blenders became synonymous with the mall experience, and you could hear them from several stores away. People would sip their orange Julius while continuing to shop, and the cups with the distinctive logo were carried throughout the mall like a status symbol. It meant you were taking a break, enjoying yourself, treating yourself to something special. The drink was marketed as healthy and refreshing, which was important during an era when people were becoming more health conscious, at least in theory. The irony is that orange Julius was loaded with sugar, but it had orange juice in it, so people convinced themselves it was basically a health food. Teenagers especially loved orange Julius, and it became a meeting spot where friends would gather before heading off to different stores. Some malls had seating areas near the orange Julius stand, and these became social hubs where people would sit and people watch while enjoying their drinks. The company eventually expanded to offer other flavors and even started serving hot dogs. But the original orange drink remained the star of today's smoothie culture, with HAE bowls and protein powder, can trace its lineage back to that simple orange drink that dominated 1960s mall culture. Fact 12. Malls closed on Sundays. If you tried to go shopping at the mall on a Sunday in the early 1960s, you would have found the doors locked and the parking lot empty. That's because most shopping malls were closed on Sundays due to blue laws, which were regulations that restricted commercial activity on the Christian Sabbath. These laws varied by state, but in many places retail establishments were required to close on Sundays to allow people to attend church and spend time with their families. The few stores that were allowed to open on Sundays were those selling necessities like pharmacies and grocery stores. But department stores and shopping malls were definitely off limits. This was just accepted as normal, and people planned their shopping accordingly. Saturday was the big shopping day, and malls would be absolutely packed with families doing their weekly shopping. The Sunday closing laws started to be challenged and repealed in different states throughout the 1960s as retailers realized how much business they were losing. By being closed one day per week, there was significant resistance from religious groups who felt that shopping on Sunday was inappropriate and would lead to the breakdown of family values. But the commercial interests eventually won out. And by the end of the 1960s, most malls in most states were open on Sundays. Although often with reduced hours, the transition wasn't smooth, and there were protests outside malls that chose to open on Sundays, with people carrying signs condemning the commercialization of the Sabbath. But for mall owners and retailers, the decision was purely economic. Sunday became one of the busiest shopping days of the week, and they couldn't afford to stay closed. Looking back, it's interesting to see how dramatically American culture shifted in just a few years, from a time when Sunday shopping was scandalous to today, when most people don't even know blue laws ever existed. Fact 13. The arcade wasn't a thing. Yet, teenagers today might find this hard to believe, but 1960s shopping malls didn't have arcades. There was no central gathering place filled with video games and pinball machines where kids could spend hours pumping quarters into machines. Video games, as we know them, simply didn't exist yet. Pong wouldn't be invented until 1972. So the entire concept of a video game arcade was still years away. What malls did have were small hobby shops that might have a pinball machine or two tucked in the back. But these were novelties rather than destinations. Some malls had penny arcades, which were very different from what we think of as arcades today. These featured older mechanical games like shooting galleries, strength testers, fortune-telling machines, and those creepy animatronic displays where you put in a coin and watch a mechanical scene play out for 30 seconds. But these were usually found at amusement parks or boardwalks, not in shopping malls. Teenagers in the 1960s had to find other ways to entertain themselves at the mall, which usually meant walking around looking at merchandise, listening to records at the music store, or getting a snack at the lunch counter. The mall was primarily a place for shopping, and the idea that it would become an entertainment destination for young people was still emerging. Some forward-thinking mall developers were starting to add movie theaters and bowling alleys. But these were exceptions rather than the rule. The lack of arcades also meant that teenagers had less reason to congregate at the mall, which mall management actually preferred. As we mentioned earlier, loitering was discouraged, and teenagers with time and little money were exactly the kind of visitors that security guards were trained to watch. It wasn't until the 1970s and especially the 1980s that arcades became a staple of mall culture, drawing teenagers in droves and fundamentally changing what the mall represented in American life. Fact 14. Movie theaters were outside the mall. Nowadays, it's common to find massive multiplex theaters inside shopping malls with escalators leading directly from the food court to the box office. But in the 1960s, movie theaters and malls were separate entities. If a mall had a theater at all, it was typically a standalone building in the parking lot, rather than integrated into the mall structure itself. This separation was intentional. Movie theaters were seen as potentially bringing an undesirable element to the shopping environment. Mall developers worried that moviegoers would take up parking spaces without shopping at the stores, or that teenagers coming to see movies would cause disruptions. The few malls that did include theaters usually had separate entrances from the parking lot, so that movie patrons didn't have to walk through the mall to reach the theater. This meant you couldn't easily combine a movie with shopping. The way we do today, going to see a movie was its own separate activity that required its own trip and its own parking spot. Movie theaters in the 1960s were still grand standalone palaces with elaborate lobbies, ornate decorations, and single large auditoriums that seated hundreds of people. The multiplex concept of having many small theaters in one location wouldn't become common until the 1970s. Going to the movies was an event you dressed up for, and the theater itself was a destination. The idea of cramming a movie theater into a shopping mall would have seemed to cheapen the movie. Going experienced theater owners took pride in their establishments and didn't want to be seen as just another retail tenant. It wasn't until malls started struggling for relevance in later decades that they began to see movie theaters as anchor attractions that could draw people to the mall who might then shop while they were there. But in the 1960s, these two worlds of entertainment and commerce remained largely separate. Fact 15. You could get your shoes bronzed at the mall. It might sound unusual today, but one quirky service offered at many 1960s shopping malls was baby shoe bronzing. Parents could bring in their child's first pair of shoes to be dipped in bronze, preserving them forever as a keepsake. The bronze shoes were typically mounted on wooden plaques or turned into bookends, becoming treasured mementos. Jewelry stores and gift shops often offered the service, sometimes featuring elaborate displays with examples in various mounting styles. Parents frequently bronzed shoes for multiple children, creating matching sets. The process took a few weeks, and the finished pieces were presented in attractive boxes, ready to display in the home. In an era when preserving childhood memories was increasingly valued by the middle class, bronze shoes symbolized permanence in a changing world, a way to hold on to fleeting moments. They were often displayed on mantles or in china cabinets, alongside other family treasures, and became conversation pieces when guests visited. Although baby shoe bronzing existed before the 1960s, the mall made it widely accessible to suburban families. Today, digital photography and video have largely replaced such practices, but there's something undeniably touching about turning a tiny, temporary pair of shoes into a permanent symbol of love and memory. Fact 16. Toy departments had live demonstrations. In the 1960s, buying a toy wasn't as simple as grabbing it from a shelf. Many department stores and shopping malls hosted live demonstrations, where professional representatives from toy manufacturers showcased their latest products. These events were carefully staged with elaborate displays designed to gather crowds of children and parents. Demonstrators would show how a toy worked, whether it was a new board game, a chemistry set, or a racing car track, often performing tricks or advanced techniques to build excitement. Children watched with wide-eyed fascination, while parents observed, knowing that the captivating display often sealed the deal. Demonstrations usually took place on weekends and during the holiday season, but some stores maintained staff demonstrators year-round for complex toys that required explanation. The presenters were skilled at interacting with the audience, asking children questions, and even letting a lucky participant try the toy, prompting every other child to beg for one. This approach turned shopping into entertainment, creating memorable experiences that lasted long after the toy was forgotten or broken. For many adults today, a particular demonstration from their childhood still stands out as the moment they knew they had to have a specific toy. It was marketing genius in action, blending showmanship and salesmanship perfectly. Fact 17. Air conditioning was the main attraction. It's hard to imagine today, but in the 1960s, air conditioning was still a novelty, and fully air-conditioned shopping malls were a major draw. Many American homes didn't have AC, especially early in the decade, so malls advertised their climate control prominently, with slogans like "Shop in cool comfort" or "Escape the heat." Signs at entrances proudly announced that the mall was fully air-conditioned, a true luxury. On hot summer days, families would visit the mall just to enjoy the cold air, sometimes with little intention of shopping. The contrast between the sweltering parking lot and the chilly interior was dramatic. Stepping inside felt genuinely refreshing. Windows would fog, and in stores with overly strong AC, you could even see your breath. Shoppers dressed with the mall in mind. Women carried cardigans, men loosened ties, and everyone appreciated the futuristic, clean atmosphere. The air conditioning not only made the mall comfortable, it created a sense of modernity and experience of technology and luxury many people didn't have at home. In the 1960s, visiting a mall wasn't just about buying goods. It was about enjoying comfort, escaping the heat, and marveling at a space that felt ahead of its time. Fact 18. Photo studios were in every mall. Long before smartphone cameras and Instagram, nearly every 1960s shopping mall had a professional photography studio. These weren't just places for passport photos, they were full-service portrait studios, where families went for formal photographs. Getting your picture taken was a big event. Since cameras were expensive, film had to be developed, and most families had only a handful of photos each year. At the mall studio, you dressed in your best clothes while the photographer carefully posed you, adjusted lighting, and took multiple shots with large format cameras. Studios featured elaborate painted backdrops, gardens, libraries, and props like fake trees or columns to make portraits look more formal. After the session, families returned a week later to view proofs and select which images to print. These studios thrived, especially around holidays and special occasions, with annual portraits sent to relatives or displayed at home. Photographers were skilled at working with squirming children and stiff adults, while some studios specialized in glamour shots for women, often given as gifts or kept in albums, though costly, equivalent to several $100s today. Professional portraits were treasured keepsakes, preserving family memories and documenting children growing up, year by year, all from the same mall studio. Fact 19. Trading stamps were like currency. If you shopped at a mall in the 1960s, you likely collected trading stamps. These small adhesive stamps were handed out by retailers as rewards for purchases. The more you spent, the more stamps you received. Shoppers pasted them into special books provided by the stamp companies. And once enough were collected, they could be redeemed for merchandise from catalogs or at redemption centers. The most popular programs were S&H green stamps and top value stamps. Though dozens of regional programs existed, department stores and supermarkets and malls heavily promoted them, and many shoppers chose stores based on the stamps they offered. Collecting stamps became a near obsession for housewives, who viewed it as a way to earn free items, even if the cost was built into higher prices. The ritual of licking stamps, pasting them into books, and poring over catalogs was often a family affair, with children helping plan what to save for: small appliances, furniture, or toys. These programs encouraged loyalty. Once you started collecting a brand, switching stores meant starting over. Trading stamps made shopping feel rewarding, turning mundane purchases into a game of savings. Though they faded in the 1970s with inflation and credit card rewards, for 1960s shoppers, those books symbolized hope, thrift, and family. Treats. Fact 20. Malls had strict dress codes. This final fact might be the most surprising to modern shoppers. Many 1960s shopping malls had strict dress codes enforced by security. You couldn't just stroll in wearing sweatpants and sneakers. Shoppers were expected to dress appropriately, which generally meant a certain level of formality. Men wore slacks and collared shirts, sometimes even suits, while women were expected to wear dresses or skirts with blouses, proper shoes, and accessories. Children also had to be neatly dressed. The rules were rarely written down, but social pressure and security intervention ensured compliance. If you appeared too casual, you could be denied entry or asked to leave. Teenagers in particular were closely monitored. Boys with long hair or girls in skirts deemed too short might be stopped. The dress code was about maintaining an atmosphere of respectability. The mall was meant to be a space for middle-class, suburban families, and clothing signaled who belonged. By today's standards, these rules were discriminatory, often excluding people based on class, race, or age. As the decade progressed and youth culture challenged these norms, the codes began to relax. By the late 1960s, jeans appeared occasionally, but casual attire was still unusual. Shopping at the mall in the 1960s was a formal affair. It demanded respect. Let me know in the comments if I missed anything. And be sure to sign up for the Recollection Road newsletter using the link in the description. The 1960s shopping mall was a truly unique experience, reflecting the values, culture, and optimism of the era. These malls offered far more than just shopping. They were community centers, social hubs, and symbols of American prosperity. From live organ music echoing through the corridors to quirky features like bomb shelters, air-conditioned comfort, and professional photography studios, malls provided entertainment, convenience, and a sense of modernity that few homes could match. Families flocked there to shop, socialize, and experience novelty, whether collecting trading stamps, watching toy demonstrations, or preserving memories with bronze baby shoes. The mall captured the imagination of a generation and left a lasting imprint on American life. As always, thank you so much for watching and for joining us on this nostalgic journey.